Welcome everybody. Benjamin, great that you can join us here into something which is a new tradition, hopefully one. We just recently had the presentation of the EIB Investment Survey for Austria, and today we are launching hopefully a new tradition, which is a survey around the CESEE region. As you know, the Austrian Nationalbank is heavily invested in the region, intellectually, emotionally, economically, and as a result of it, we are very happy and pleased that we have a survey which is the first time presented here, and which offers hopefully also a number of interest with our staff, but also offers incentives to expand our research even further. As you will see, the results of the survey, which I flipped through with great interest, will raise a number of interesting points. Some of them are a bit, of course, requiring action, because at the current juncture what we have is weak investment, and we have also protected industrial recession in the new CESEE member state, and what we have also seen, it's a deterioration in price competitiveness. I was just putting together another presentation I have to give in the future, and I was looking into Austrian price competitiveness, what had happened in the recent past. And we fit very nicely with our neighbors. We have the same problem that with regards to our wage prices, we exaggerated. And as a result of this, our price competitiveness has been substantially reduced. Well, this of course asks the question, why are investments rather weak in recent time? Well, as it turns out, it's not monetary policy. It's not the interest rate, which are the reason for that. I think, and we are very much witnesses to nowadays, it is very much the unprecedented global uncertainty. This is something we could watch recently, spending a week in US, first in New York and then in Washington, talking to the market, talking to academic colleagues, talking people from the Fed. This high level of uncertainty is really what holds us back, and unfortunately, it will also weigh heavily on our development. And since I just for a speech and then also a blog I did today, I put the numbers together. The IMF last week published its latest projection of the GDP impact of the recent political decisions in the US there, how much it weighs on the growth bars. And if you put the growth differential compared to the prior bars together, you arrive at 0.8% of world GDP. 0.8%, this is roughly the size of the Austrian GDP. So it's about 600 billion there. And so 600 billion have been lost as part of the current projected announcement of the tariffs there. Well, if you put this together, you will ask, well, how much is this compared with money spent on development aid there? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? Well, development aid, the latest figures they have ticked up is in dollars, 230 billion. So if you calculate it, so what is lost is 3 years of development aid there, with this projection there. And of course, this cannot remain unnoticed, but this does not mean that one has now to dig in and say we don't do anything. What it means that we have to do even more in these areas in order to, how to say, fight against the rating loss of competitiveness. And it is this business environment and the changes there. This is the content of the reports. And you will see the data, and then you will ask the question, how can investments then stimulate it? What can happen in these countries there? And in this few remarks that also my staff had prepared, of course, one question came up, we have the German investment impact, which will be out there. Well, first of all, it's not there. Secondly, we don't know how much it is, and I'm not so sure how much each of us will profit from it. So I think we will profit a little bit, but most of the change will have to happen with our own efforts there. And these efforts also mean, and this is something which of course is the most difficult part of it, is that our competitiveness needs to be increased. And what has happened in Austria, but also in most neighboring countries, is that part of the fight against COVID, part of the possibilities happening through a lot of fiscal support of these countries, wages have been increased beyond what they should. As a result of it, we lost heavily competitiveness. And this is something, of course, is politically difficult to present, in particular to translate into relevant policy action. But all this will be very soon explained in detail by Matteo Ferrazzi from the EIB. Thanks a lot for coming here. Looking forward to the presentation, and I wish us all a vivid and very candid discussion of the findings, and particularly afterwards implementation in the countries. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the presentation discussion.
So good afternoon to everybody, for the people here in the room, but also those online. For those in the room, you have seen that we have the report outside. Actually, there is a full analysis on investments. So that's the topic that we are dealing with today. Maybe I need some help for switching. Okay, thank you so much. I was going too fast. So the focus will be on investments. Investments are key in times of transformation, of course, and we are in a rather difficult situation during 2024. So this is even before Trump administration, before the uncertainty of the last, I would say, weeks, not only months or quarters. So you see that the investment cycle is weakening in Western Europe, that you see there, on Europe in general, and in Central Eastern Europe as well. And you see that the gray part, that is the general government. So that's the public sector is helping on this because it's on the positive side. But the private sector, corporations and households, are contributing negatively. And this is, we have data until Q3, but that's a clear trend. Focusing 1 second on the public investments. So here again, the comparison is the average of EU versus Central Eastern Europe. And this is the role of public investment. And I just ask you to focus on the scale. So you see the maximum there is 5%, we will need later. And you should sum up the public investment and the investment grants that are going directly normally to companies to invest. So if you sum up the two, normally here you would get around 5.1 in Europe on average, and Central Eastern Europe is higher, is almost close to 6%. So the first message here is that it's growing, has been growing in the last years, supported, of course, by the different also European plans. It is higher in Central and Eastern Europe, so the impact of the governments on investments is rather strong. And the last point here is that, that we should not forget that a big chunk of investments are happening also at local government level. It's a bit less in Central and Eastern Europe. So in Central and Eastern Europe, investments are more centralized when we speak about the public sector. So the role of public investments is key, and I will not now enter the technicalities of the new fiscal framework, but the EU new fiscal framework is trying to preserve public investments as much as possible. This maybe will work, not so strongly maybe, but it will be an important point compared to the previous fiscal adjustments that we have seen. Investments accelerations is always coming normally with big changes. So if you look at this very simple line, that is the investment over GDP, you see accelerations when we built the EU single market, when we adopted the euro, when we had the EU enlargement for Central Eastern European countries, and also the COVID time with the Green Deal and RRF. So now the question is, are we in a transformational period? But probably yes. Is this the right time to invest? Probably yes. How to do that will be the debate, I think, of today, especially in the panel later. So hopefully we are, in terms of transformation, there are big opportunities as well. And normally the private sector is finding a lot of business opportunities to invest. So it's not only the public contributing. Just one more point on the German stimulus that was mentioned before. So this is a potential structural shift, not only for Germany, for Europe as well, and for Central Eastern Europe. But the question is, how big is it? How relevant is it? First of all, it is a turning point in terms of concept. So that's relevant. And you see it's mainly made of 3 blocks. The first one is known. The infrastructure part of 500 billion. This is almost 12% of GDP divided by 12 years. So it's a bit less than 1% of GDP. Not huge, but relevant. The other part is more unknown. So it's a bit more difficult to be estimated, and it is on defense. So this could be in a range of 300-400 billion in 10 years. So it is another 0.78 of GDP for Germany. And then there are some possibilities for the federal states to go into the deficit. So these 3 blocks are having very different effects on Central Eastern European region. So the first block on infrastructure will probably mainly stay in Germany. Is infrastructure, German infrastructure, construction sector, and mainly on construction. 1/3 will be on manufacturing, so materials like iron, cements, tiles, and so on. But the rest will be on construction. So this is mainly focusing on Germany, with the spillovers effect rather limited. The other part is more activating the trading partners. The issue here is that, of course, this is not everything going to Central and Eastern Europe, not at all. But for instance, a big chunk is going to the US. So we will buy some security and defense material from the US. So again, the spillovers are not huge. So my colleagues were doing this exercise. You see the size of the spillovers. The highest one is for Czech Republic. This is in terms of GDP, is 0.07 for Czech Republic. Then the second beneficiary is Austria, according to this quick estimate we have done. Then Slovenia, Luxembourg, Hungary, Slovakia, and Poland. This is not huge. I think this estimate is a bit underestimating the indirect effects that are possible, seen with the remittances, workers, activation of many other things that are always happening in the region when Germany is restarting. So the question that I have here is the structural shift. Yes, it is, for Germany for sure, not so much for Central Eastern Europe. So the region should count a lot on his own forces. So we cannot hope that the German package is solving the issue of the region. Then the other important topic, of course, I cannot avoid to speak about that. It's about trade. I will take a little bit of different perspective. So first of all, Central Eastern European countries are very important exporter exporters, you see that almost 70% of the CEE exporters, CEE companies are exporting. And this is bigger than in EU, that EU is already a very powerful exporter with a very relevant trade balance. I will not stress too much because otherwise Trump will additionally put some other tariffs, but Europe is having a healthy positive trade balance. Central Eastern Europe, very strong exporter. You see the manufacturing companies of Central Eastern Europe, 90% are exporting. So they are mainly devoted to the external market. This is a very huge market. If you compare with other big countries like France, Italy, and so on, that's a big, big number. So there is a culture of exporting and so on. We were asking in the last years, how do you, let's say, how you are responding to the trade challenges? Because now we should not forget that since COVID, we have been subject to very relevant obstacles with trade, and especially the issue was different, was on sourcing. So we are asking them, which was your reaction? What are you doing? You see here, first of all, the news is that they were all reacting in Central Eastern Europe more than EU on average. So that's a good news for the region. So they are probably taking a lot of actions. So they are increasing stocks and inventories. They were investing in digital inventories and inputs tracking, for instance, reducing the share of imported goods. But what is very different, so on the positive side, they are diversifying. So it seems in the last years, the Central Eastern European companies were diversifying a lot their export markets. And we've seen a lot when we go, for instance, in Middle East or in third countries, we see that Central Eastern European players are increasing their role there. So if we look at the actions taken here on this side, I think there is a very good feeling that Central Eastern European companies are taking action. Now let's move, this is the past. So we have seen they are very reactive. They've been facing quite well the previous, let's say, glut in trade. But let's move now to the current situation. So that's the final destination of domestic manufacturing value added on GDP. So it's more or less how much it is exported out of the production. So how much is exported in particular to US in blue and China in red. I put both of them because China can be also impacted by, of course, it is impacted by the trade tariffs and so on. Of course, there are some interesting messages here. So first of all, Slovakia is the country more exposed to US and China. This we know. The second one is Germany, actually. So I put also Germany as a comparator here. And Germany is very exposed. And we will see later, again, this concept will come later because the German exporters count very much on the US market and the Chinese market. And then, of course, we have other countries that are Czech Republic, Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovenia. So in general, the level of exposure of Central Eastern Europe is relatively high on export, but relatively mild or not so high on the US. Why? Because Central Eastern European exporters are mainly focusing on Western Europe. They are exporting to Italy, to France, to Germany, to Belgium, Netherlands, and so on. So this is creating a sort of protection. So once again, the single market, the European market, is creating this kind of protection. And as I was telling you before, they are more and more exploring different countries, including Middle East, for instance, or North Africa. So that's the concept. My colleagues, so again, my colleagues were working on this. It seems that I've just chosen the colors of the presentation and my colleagues were working on these estimates, but this is not the case. But they were doing another study, very quick one, because this is a recent one on the impact on the tariffs. Here there is a lot of uncertainty, and of course, we should take this as a hypothesis based on the 20% tariffs that, as you know now, is posed. But this would be the impact for EU GDP, direct impact, 0.78%. And this would be the sum of direct and indirect. You see, the main indirect impact is China for EU. So there is an indirect impact in China. What happens if we look at Central Eastern Europe? Is lower. First of all, is lower than EU. That's the first information. And the first indirect impact is not China, but is Germany. So what does it mean? So that the German export to the US, this is the impact of the German export going to the US, including the Central Eastern European content. So exporters from Czech Republic, from Slovakia are, I don't know, helping to create a German car that is going to the US. So that's this direct impact. That's why Germany is first here, and for EU is China. If you sum up, more or less, we need to sum up other 20 basis points. But overall, the impact on Central Eastern Europe is a bit lower than the average of EU. Why? Because, again, the countries are not so much focusing on United States as the average of EU. So if we take some countries, especially Germany, but we have other countries as well, the exposure to US is higher. So that's a sort of good news for Central Eastern Europe. Still, you see that the indirect impact are playing a role. Now, I wanted to, let's say, disentangle a bit or analyze the different investments, starting from the part on innovation. So we ask to the companies every year how they are investing, which are the investment plans, what they are planning to do. And these are quite original data because it's proprietary data that we asked to 12,000 companies, and we can compare the different countries. So here we ask, which are your investment priorities? The darker part, that is actually green, darker green, is mainly the innovation part. So we ask, their investment priorities are new products and services. And you see the average of Central Eastern Europe and the average of Europe is very similar. So on the innovation side, at least on this dimension, Central Eastern Europe seems to be quite stronger. And the light green is the capacity expansion, which is also relevant. And the other one is simply replacement. So they are replacing their capacity, which is, of course, a bit less interesting than providing new products and services, which are new products and services for the company, for the country, or for the world. So on investment priorities and innovation, the picture is quite well. Of course, we see a lot of differentiation across countries. Some countries are victim of their, let's say, economic structure. So if you are more on tourism, maybe you tend to be less innovative than on manufacturing. But that explains also the positioning of the countries. But you see again Czech Republic here, for instance. Then we ask about the use of advanced technologies. So are you using technologies? So first of all, here is the usage, is not the invention, because otherwise here the US would be by far better. So we are comparing Europe, average of Europe, Central Eastern Europe, and the US by single technology. So don't worry about all these asterisks. It's simply saying that we are asking to different sectors. Of course, about the drones, the use of drones, we ask to the construction sector. Manufacturing, we ask for something else, like, I don't know, Internet of Things or big data and so on. In general, you see that Central Eastern Europe is a bit weaker than the US. That's quite relevant in some cases. It's a bit expected, but rather in line with the average of Europe. So on single technologies, the use of advanced digital technology, the situation is rather good. I would say one exception is the digital platform. So for instance, e-commerce or other kind of platforms, there is a gap in Central Eastern Europe, and I see as an opportunity to increase this side. But if you look at the other, like use of drones or automation, so Central Eastern Europe is quite strong on manufacturing, and you see automation is good. 3D printing and so on, I think that's good. I find this data quite interesting because they are quite unique. They are not provided normally in the statistics, in the normal statistics. Last few considerations. So on this, we have seen that Central Eastern Europe countries were quite good. Now let's go to something in which there are some gaps. Here is the role of intangible investments. These are the yellow parts. Intangible, here I'm summing up research and development, training of employees, softwares, and also processes, business processes. So if we sum up this, you see that EU is investing by far more than Central Eastern Europe on intangible investments. So that's, I think, something that is, this gap should be closed, let's say, in some way, because the intangible part is very important. Of course, again, here, the machinery and so on is also driven by the manufacturing orientation of Central Eastern Europe. And if you look by country as well, you see the EU average is very high there. So only Czech Republic is able to beat the EU average in terms of intangible investments. So opportunities here for improving this gap. You see that the EU is quite high also compared to the US. One more investment, the last one of my analysis, is the climate transition. So these are investments in the climate transition. Again, these data are quite peculiar, quite original, because you don't find in the statistics. Here there is a source of concern. So we ask if the transition is a risk or an opportunity. Here I'm not talking about climate risk and adaptation. I'm talking about energy transition and reduction of CO2 emissions and so on. And you see that the green, so the opportunity part, is really lower in Central Eastern Europe. So there are concerns that the transition is a risk, which means, by the way, these people of, let's say, neutral, in which they say, okay, no risk, no opportunity, is shrinking every year. Across the years, we see this shrinking. So people is starting to say, okay, that's an opportunity for me, or I see as a risk. So the things are moving on, and then this gray bar is reduced across the years. But there is a good news here. So there is a gap, there is a concern, but the good news is that we see that the, companies are taking action. So these are the measures they are taking, which means the actions. So you see that if we compare the Central Eastern European countries with the US and EU, and we sum up all the actions, more or less we are having a very similar situation. Also very important, you see Central Eastern Europe is rather strong also in energy efficiency, a bit less than EU, but also strong in renewable energy generation, waste, and a bit less on sustainable transport. So you see here, these charts are very useful for us because we like, when there is a gap, we try to invest in this part. So we see the gap, we see as something positive in which we can have a role and we can help. So you should not see only as a finger pointing. The green transition is really an opportunity. What we have seen, Europe is having a leadership. Here is one of the dimensions. These are green patents in clean tech, the green tech patents by region. So you see EU is very big, first of all, and it is in a center of a lot of cooperations. Maybe you may see this as a potential risk if we will have less cooperation, but EU is really at the center of patenting of green technologies. That's very important, and probably you notice in many other fields, but the increase of the export of green goods is massive. It's not so strong for US, very strong for China, very strong for EU, and okay, even higher for Central Eastern European countries. So even if we may be any person even skeptical about the role of energy efficiency or any kind of transition, they will need to admit that there is a lot of potential in the sense that there is a big market growing, not only in Europe with the regulation, green regulations, we will touch later this topic, but there is a big potential of exports, increasing exports that we've seen in the last years. So building this value chain is really very important. Final part, the barriers that we've seen. First of all, we always monitor the obstacles. We ask which is the obstacle, why you are not investing, which are the obstacles. So first, this was before Trump, was uncertainty. So uncertainty was blocking many companies from investing. So they wanted to invest more, but they say, okay, the uncertainty, I'm like paralyzed and I'm not investing so much as I would like because of uncertainty. Second one, energy cost, and we are back to the transition. Third one is the availability of skilled staff, so labor tightness, especially for skilled people. And what is interesting that these are common of Europe, average, and Central Eastern Europe. But in Central Eastern Europe, these are more acute. So, of course, probably we also touch this later, the availability of skilled staff. We have seen a brain drain also in the region. So these are more acute. Energy is a problem in the region. Uncertainty, I don't know why it's higher than you, but this is impacting very much. We also asked this year something interesting. So we ask whether their products are subject to varying requirements, standards, or consumer protection. So that's for us a proxy of segmentation of the single market. And that's an issue here that the Central Eastern European countries see that they find more obstacles than Western companies. So for them, the single market is not so compact as it is for Western companies. So it seems like there is an invisible wall for many companies in the East to break this wall and to go to the West and without requirements. This, I don't have a full explanation for this. I see that it's very high in services, which is also a surprise in the sense that the manufacturing part is a bit less felt, still very relevant. And it is the same for, almost the same for large and SME. Large and SME, normally they have a big difference in all the answers. This one, no, they find the same obstacles. So even if you have a big structure, you find some obstacles. So there is a big potential, a big potential upside coming from the market integration. Last point, really last one, on the financing. I will not touch the topic, it's very broad, but just 2 points. First of all, the venture capital financing, especially the scale-up part. I don't know if some of you had the occasion to visit this, I would define a very almost incredible environment in San Francisco. I've been visiting the startups, the incubators, and I can tell you that I was shocked. And this was 2 years ago, before artificial intelligence, and they are sick for innovation. And this, in the first years, Europeans and Americans are happy to finance the ideas. But after 5 years, so when the company is becoming a bit bigger, there is a big gap. So here, you see that the cumulative capital in this is only San Francisco, so it's from the Bay, is double, is having a 51% more. So so we are talking about almost double, yes, more than double, and so that's a huge gap that is created going on. So here, this problem should be addressed. So the ideas are there, and you see in the first phase. But the financing is not there in the next phase. So that's, for me, something very relevant. Here, I could compare the VC investments in EU. Of course, this is driven by a lot of one-offs. For instance, Bolt in the Estonia. So CEE appear quite good, but of course, it's very much determined by the one-off of this round of investments. And how Central Eastern European, so we will speak a lot in the future about the Capital Market Union. And you see where population is keeping the money. A lot of lazy money, like IMF is defining it. So 40% is in deposits and cash in Central Eastern Europe. So this money is not flowing to innovation, to new ideas. Very high as well in the EU, and very low in the US. Maybe this period is good because there is a bit of market volatility. So those having this green part are suffering because of equity, but in general, this is delivering less results and is not financing the companies. Plus, there is a huge home bias. So the Italian banks are investing in Italian bonds, French banks in French bonds, pension funds, German pension funds in German bonds, and so on. Insurance companies as well. So there is a really big investments in the domestic market. So this is not, let's say, the ideal situation, because normally you would invest in what is best for you, not based on the nationality, your nationality if you are European. So you see that the other 27 part, so the light blue is rather small. So this light blue would be, I don't know, a German insurance fund buying French bonds, for instance. That's very low. And they are all buying local instruments. So conclusions. There is a potential for EU investments in times of transformation. That's a very important occasion. sometimes we are used to think how important it is for the government to push for investments, but it's also private business that is finding the opportunities in such a period. But public investments, as we have seen, are playing a very important role, very relevant roles, especially in this part. The focus should be on innovation, digital. We have seen that Central Eastern European countries are quite good in this. Also in tangible goods and climate and energy transition. Here, in these two aspects, we have seen there are some gaps. The barriers to investments are more pressing in Central Eastern Europe than in Europe on average. So we have said that the uncertainty, even before Trump, the energy cost, and the skilled labor force. So we should not forget the green leadership of Europe. Another leadership Europe has are the social investments. So the social model of Europe is helping a lot, also economic-wise, and also the relevance of very important targeted and European policies like EU funds, cohesion policies, RRF, and so on. And also our strength should be the single market, and we have seen there are still some barriers that hopefully will gradually disappear. So that's, let's say, setting the scene, and we're ready for the panel.
Thank you, Matteo. I think you perfectly set the scene, and thank you also for joining us now in the discussion. And I would like to ask my panelists also to come to the floor, because we will straight dive into discussion now. So please join me here on the stage. We have even, this is me. Yeah. Excuse me. Okay. So I'm very happy to have such an really exquisite panel here, and I must say I'm even a bit intimidated, because you are all, I accept now Matteo, but you are all running businesses, taking decisions that really matter. This is something that we usually like to talk about the theory. Maybe we have some numbers to look at some broader pictures, but I think it will be very interesting now to talk to you as the experts who are really in the field and are also active in the countries we were talking about. We thought, Matteo and our team here at ÖNB, we thought a little bit about the title for this discussion. And as you see, as the title we chose, Accelerating Investment in CESEE by Completing the Single Market and Delivering on the Digital and Climate Transition. This is a pretty long title, I admit, but what is central in the title is the single market. And why did we come up? You ended by mentioning the single market in your presentation. And so why did we come up with this European single market as a central focal point here? Let me just say a few words on the single market, because I remember very well I spent my Erasmus year in Great Britain in 1992-93, and everyone there was really excited about the single market when it came into life on the 1st of January in 1993. And I, as an Austrian, I felt really privileged to be part of this event. It was like street festival. People were really, especially the young people, were really, we had parties, we had gimmicks, I even bought some fights with the single market, all the countries of Europe, but I did not wear them today because I felt it would be inappropriate. But I also felt very privileged to be part of this event. As an Austrian at the time, I was not even an EU citizen. But this idea was compelling, and the idea or the vision that it has, it looked like, or it seemed like a bold vision at the time, to have free movement of goods, services, capital, and people across national borders. And to a large extent, this has become a reality now in this past 30 years. So let me just cite a few figures which the Commission has put together when they celebrated the 30th anniversary of the single market. So it's the world's largest common market of 450 million customers, more than 8 trillion euro of intra-EU FDI stocks, 3.5 trillion euro of intra-EU exports of goods, and almost 1 trillion euro exports of services. And this intra-EU trade supports 56 million jobs, and 17 million EU citizens live or work in a country that is not their own. And over the last 30 years, more than 10 million students, among them myself, have enjoyed this Erasmus student program abroad. So today we are focusing on the EU member states that actually joined much later in 2004, 7 and 2013. And these countries are really unique in their transition and their rapid economic convergence. And there is a large number of studies, and thanks to our governor's traveling activities and lecturing activities, we had we could look at the literature here, and there are a large number of studies showing that the most sizable effect of convergence, EU membership has been decisive and has been very influential, and this has made a difference. So EU accession is estimated to have added around 30% of income per capita against the counterfactual for these countries, a counterfactual development without having joined the EU. And the gains of EU accessions, they come primarily from joining the single market, and that's we are back to the single market. So this has brought down the barriers to trade and factor movements, but it also provides legal certainty, harmonized rules and standards, and it improves investment opportunities and access to funding. On the other hand, we all know it remains incomplete. And it is also criticized more fundamentally. If you read the Letta report, he claims that it's a concept of the 20th century, and as such, it's not fit to address today's problem. So is it a success, or is it a construction site? So what can be done to complete it and to bring out the best of it? Among the issues, the objective of the current single market program are increasing effectiveness and supporting competitiveness, in particular of small and medium-sized enterprises. So today we will focus in our discussion a little bit on these questions. How can the single market support and improve finance for investment in the EU and especially in Central Eastern Europe? Does it foster convergence by reducing fragmentation? How about the regulatory burden in the EU? Do we have too much, too little, or not the right regulation? And how can we provide the financing that is necessary to promote innovation and the green and digital innovation? And I'm very fortunate, as I said, to have this excellent panel here with me and look forward to discussing these questions with you. You know, I will briefly introduce my panelists now before we dive into the discussion. You know already Matteo, he is principal advisor at the European Investment Bank, and he observes, and he has shared this with us before, that investment accelerations come at the time of structural shifts that generate new business opportunities. There is a potential for investments in CESEE, Central East and Southeastern Europe, with focus on investments in innovation, digital and intangible investments, and on the climate and energy transition. So thank you for staying with us on the panel, Matteo. Kalina Belowska is a specialist in structuring and financing for conventional and renewable power projects, real estate and public infrastructure. Kalina is the Chief Investment Officer of Renalfa Solarpro Group GmbH, which is based in Vienna. So this RSG company invests and develops projects for clean energy and e-mobility in a number of CESEE countries. And Kalina is convinced that the commercial banking sector in Europe is supporting quite well-established companies investing in Central and Eastern Europe. The challenge, however, is to support newcomers, innovators and high-growth companies. And for this, the Austrian banking sector, she says, can play a crucial role to support regional investments with the support of the EU. Very warm welcome, Kalina, and thanks for being with us. Then we have Jörg Schmidt, CFO and member of the board of AVL. AVL is a leading mobility technology company that delivers concept solutions, methodologies, and development tools for a greener, safer, and better world of mobility, as you claim on your website. Jörg has collected management experience at Volkswagen and GM and specialized in technologies and drive engineering. And he says that accelerating investment in CESEE requires more than capital. It needs skilled talent, strong research partnerships, and coordinated regulation and fundings. At AVL, we are turning transition goals into industrial reality. Welcome, Jörg. And last but not least, we have Christine Würfel with us, who started her career at the European Parliament as a legal manager before joining the Raiffeisenbank International in 2008. And she has worked in the area of regulatory affairs, regulatory transparency, and responsible banking, I would say almost since the start of your career. You're a real expert in these topics. And since February 23, she's the head of the group ESG and Sustainability Management at RBI. And Christine is convinced that sustainability is a key enabler of EU competitiveness, driving long-term solutions, ensuring stability in times of uncertainty, and providing the advantage of resilient, future-proof economies. So thank you very much for joining us today, Christine. Well, maybe let's start by looking at financing sources and the role of the Single Market Program. So according to the Commission's website, this program is an integrated setup expected to constitute a more flexible and agile financing framework, which will make it possible to better exploit synergies and prevent duplication and fragmentation. So maybe I turn first to Kalina and Jörg. What are the most relevant financing sources for your companies? So do EU funds play a role in your industries? And would you agree that these funds provide for flexible and agile financing?
Thank you very much, Julia. Just one sentence about the industry I work in. Basically, I represent an investment fund that invests in renewable energy, mostly solar, also wind, and recently we are investing in industrial scale storage for renewable energy, obviously. And we started as a Bulgarian company, then we developed projects in other countries in the region, in Romania, in Poland, in Hungary, in Northern Macedonia, and eventually we found a home in Austria. Because when you're a regional player, you need to position yourself in a country where you also have better access to financing. The last 5-6 years have been a period of very strong growth for us, which is a growth that has been enjoyed by the renewable industry, also with the support of the European Union and general European policy for supporting the green transition. What we've been able to achieve came, of course, with the support of external financing. We are using mostly bank financing, and what we've seen is that commercial banks are quite comfortable once you've had a few years of history and success, and if you are an established player, if you have achieved success in the past, and also if you're willing to operate under project finance, of course, you get access to financing. However, there is a limitation to that when you want to be innovative and when you want to achieve very fast growth. And for this, we have sought to find sources that are more supportive of growth, quasi-equity, mezzanine type of funding, and this is not readily available for the region. We are actively working also with private debt funds, not only with commercial banks, but for a number of reasons, I would say mostly political risks, because Central and Eastern Europe has also the proximity to war zones. This type of more sophisticated financing is more hard to come across. We've seen lately some very positive developments with regards to support from the European Union through a special program which is called EU Invest, which provides guarantees to commercial banks and to international financial institutions that lend to high growth companies dedicated to the green transition, and we have taken advantage of this support. What we have less success with is subsidies, dedicated subsidies, for example, for subsidies for battery deployment. And this is not because such subsidies are not available, but because they are designated to be actually deployed through governmental agencies. In countries where there is certain political instability, or when the subsidies were designed as a package of money for reforms, and the reforms didn't happen, the subsidies were actually put on hold or delayed, or never became available as expected, or they have a time limitation which is very restrictive, and when there is a certain delay, actually the money designated is never taken advantage of, but will go back to the European Union, which is a shame. So we've had, I would say, mostly success with raising financing. We've managed to grow. However, it needs to be noted that for scalability and in order to be able to compete on a global scale, also outside of the European Union, one needs to have more flexible financing and more sophisticated forms of financing, which, as you mentioned, when you go to San Francisco and when you see the hubs with the startups, there is a different energy, and this different energy comes with a different mindset for financing and for supporting risks for innovation. I think for Europe, in order to catch up, there needs to be a dedicated effort in that regards.
Good message taken, I hope, Matteo. But overall, EU is not. It has some good things in the basket for you. How about you, Jörg?
I think we are following a slightly different business model, and maybe you give me the time to share this as well here with the audience. So as you mentioned, we are a technology company. We are focused on mobility technologies, energy transformation, and as well some niche industrial applications. But we heavily invest in R&D. We approximately reinvest 10% of our revenue on an annual basis into research and development. We register in Austria the most patents, I think 14 years in a row, and they are mostly green patents. So what is the purpose of our business? And we did a significant investment over the last couple of years, more than 1.1 billion euros, into transforming our portfolio from being the world market leader in ICE, where we, since the foundation of the company, always had the purpose to reduce emission and increase efficiency of the ICE, and then as well cross-investing into the new fields, so that, just to put this into perspective, when I had my first conversations about AVL with Professor List, the company had approximately 25% of the revenues with new technologies. Last year, it was close to 60% with new technologies. So a huge investment. And how do we do this? Approximately 70% of our employees are scientists or engineers. So we are not so much, yes, we have as well some value add through the development and the construction of test equipment, et cetera, but we live really by innovation. So this is what we contribute, and as well to your comment as well, AVL is strategically, financially, emotionally, and as well culturally very much invested as well in Eastern Europe and Southern Eastern Europe. We are active in 6 countries. We employ approximately 1,500 scientists and engineers in the region. And there we really benefit as well of operating in a common market. So for us, these are colleagues like any other colleague we have in Stuttgart or Munich or Graz or in another place. So this makes as well the answer to your funding topic. We are a business. So we're in the business of business. So in the end, when I'm sitting here as a CFO, yes, I need to make sure that we generate enough cash flow on the one side and have, I think, trustful as well relationship with our partners. for example, as well for the European Investment Bank, where I'm very grateful as well for the partnership. So we tend to have a long horizon because strategically we have long investments and innovation cycles, because from an idea to basic research, then to development, up to developing something and to introduce it into the market, covers a long time span. So for us, having, so to say, a long funding horizon and having as well some headroom to as well master some swings like a COVID crisis, or to as well invest into new emerging technologies we see coming up on the horizon in our network of close to 100 technical universities globally, and as well a lot in Eastern Europe. And so basically it's really built on three pillars. One is, of course, operating cash flow, shareholder equity. It's a family business, so it's limited, of course. Yeah, so we cannot just go to the capital markets. And then, secondly, of course, it's the long-term partnerships here with, in particular, of course, with the banks in Austria, who have grown with us over the last 77 years. But over time, we have as well developed partnerships as well with other international banks, but as well with institutions like the European Investment Bank, ÖKB, KfW. So I think we have a good balance between sponsored banks and private sector banks, different mix of instruments, and I think as well in the duration, I think a good structure. But I think when you talk from a business perspective about investment in R&D, it is very much, of course, it is as well a decision on marginal points, because you have a lot of different investment opportunities in a global operation which are competing for resources. So, and there I think it's very important to understand that you have instruments that help to keep up the competitiveness as well on the global pace and not only on the regional pace, because frankly, a customer of ours in Japan or Korea wouldn't care less what the frame conditions are in a country. So they want to have the best products and the best services from AVL. But there are tools, and they are very important for us as well with regard to these long-term initiatives, like Horizon Europe, like IPCEI, where we really are we embrace them, we support them, and not only because of this. A company like AVL, which is a global niche scaler, in particular is a European niche scaler. Yeah? So for us, Europe is a home market, and we do approximately 60% of our business in Europe. So I see the European integration and the European market very positively. And for companies like AVL, I think it is essential. I wouldn't want to imagine to have 27 country boundaries, borders to manage again. So I think with all the criticisms that is sometimes in the room, I think we should as well appreciate what we have created, what we have.
Thank you. Matteo, how are the EU institutions reshaping their agenda in the current context?
Yeah, there's
we heard some of the programs are really helpful.
A lot of things to do first.
Not everything.
Because the geopolitical context is changing, and there is an acceleration of the changes as well. But it's not since the last few weeks, but it's already last year. If you read the famous Draghi report, you see already that the authors are a little bit worried of this evolution with China, with the US already 1 year ago. And so we are not, European institutions are not in the business as usual mode, and there is a lot of reshaping of the EU agenda. And the main, let's say, directions, so are climate, innovation, digitalization. So these are all things that the EIB is financing and the European Commission is financing. Security and defense, of course, very relevant now. Our bank, for instance, is not financing lethal ammunitions, but it is enlarging the spectrum of activities like technologies, drones, research and development, barracks, transport, many other things that can be financed in the defense and security sector. The Capital Market Union, this data that I was showing about the segmentation of the financial markets, that's an issue. And also we are a bit reshaping also relationship with the external partners. So building new bridges with other countries mainly. So all these things is a sort of investments in the competitiveness of EU, which is broad. It's not only what we have in mind as a companies able to export or to invest, but is also strategic autonomy, for instance. And so that's the main direction. So we are talking about energy, international alliances, critical raw materials, technological leadership. So every euro that EIB is investing in these activities is a sort of investment in the security and autonomy of the region. So we see many changes, focusing a lot of investments in particular, and the EIB is a bit, let's say, the lending arm of the EU Commission.
Thank you. So maybe we can later come back to this point whether these new turns are really sort of solving the problems that you raised, Kalina. But let me turn to Christine first and look at an issue where the single market looks incomplete. At least it looks very incomplete if we ask the entrepreneurs from the CESEE countries. As Matteo has told us from the EIB Investment Survey, the firms were asked whether their key product is subject to different regulatory requirements and standards with respect to consumer protection, health, safety standards, environmental standards, etc. And it turns out that a large share, 78% of the firms responded that they have to comply with such different standards from one member state to the next. So maybe the truck doesn't have to stop at the border anymore, but if you want to sell a product in 27 EU countries, you seem to be facing very different standards still. And the perception is apparently higher in Eastern Europe of these differences than in Western Europe. So do you agree that the firms in Central Eastern Europe have faced too many regulatory burdens? Does, for instance, from your field, can you say, are there different ESG standards in the markets where you are active?
Thank you very much. I mean, for RBI as an international banking group, the banking sector per se is regulated, I think, in a very detailed way. I think one of the most regulated industry in Europe. So we have here, in a way, a financial services landscape within the EU, which is regulated, which is most of the time harmonized. But of course, if you look to CEE and what I can see also from RBI, where we are active in 12 countries, which are within the European Union, but also outside the EU, within the Eurozone, outside the Eurozone, it is anyhow from the very beginning, and it was always our aim to support here a harmonization. And actually the so-called Brussels effect worked quite well, because when we as a consolidated banking group had to introduce regulatory requirements within our group, it didn't matter if it was the EU only or also outside the EU. So this was already for our consolidated group. We used the European standards. If I make an example, for example, with the now so very famous and cumbersome Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, for example.
For example, a good example, I would say.
I mean,
very often discussed.
we published our sustainability statement now in February, and it was a lot of work, not only for us, but for the whole industry. And actually here, if you see here, we had to produce a consolidated group report, so with EU countries and non-EU countries. First point. Then additionally, 5 EU subsidiaries of RBI Group, so Czech Republic, Slovakia, Romania, Croatia, and Hungary. They had to produce their own local report additionally. Plus, we had also external auditors who did their job as well. And also we had national authorities with sometimes additional requirements and requests. And with all this, it made it quite complicated to then ensure consistency, of course, of all the data points. And here, of course, more harmonization could be used, or only the consolidated report. Sometimes it's going, the good intention goes too much, and then it gets an administrative burden. Therefore, we have now the omnibus package. But actually here, for the banking sector at least, we are again here in between, because omnibus says, okay, we will simplify the requirements, the data. We will postpone it for a certain scope of companies. But on the other side, we have the supervisor, which is still very interested in our ESG data of the portfolio of our clients. But with omnibus, we will get less data. So here, this is a counterintuitive reaction, so to say, and I think here is something to solve also in the future, that the necessary data is there, because, and this is something, if we talk about innovation, digitalization, I mean, data is needed. And as always, it's very cumbersome at the very beginning to collect this data, but at the end, you can, of course, here offer a lot of added value if you have this data. And it's key also for the ESG pathway. Therefore, this has to be solved, because I think this is a kind of basis to really then accelerate also the sustainable transition of the region, but also for Europe.
Thank you, and also for giving this, I think, very relevant example. Maybe we can just have a very quick round if you just answer yes or no. Do we have too much regulation in the EU? And I start now with Matteo, and you may not use the economist's answer.
No, let's say the omnibus packages means that there were some room.
Too much, yes or no?
No.
Okay, Kalina?
No.
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 No. And I understood you that we need data, so maybe also not yes or no?
Regulation, it's a no, it was necessary. Now we have to simplify it in a way to make it manageable. Yeah.
Maybe another round, quick round, and now you can answer with a full sentence. Is the omnibus good? Will it help us to sort of get out of this impasse also? I start with you.
I don't know at the end. So it was a good intention, but at least for my industry, I don't know if it really helps.
I agree. I think that regulation, that we learn that regulation that has been introduced for a first time in that magnitude, I think it is a good signal that we get some dynamical learning into it. I think this is a very good sign. Will this be the last round of learning? I hope not, but I think that this is just a continuous process of learning and improving, as well as, so to say, accepting the feedback of the institution that have to work with it. I think this would be, and I'm optimistic about that this will happen. Okay. I think secondly, we need to think, and following your examples, and I could share similar observations on a smaller scale at our house, I think we need to keep in mind that this additional burden or effort creates as well additional costs for private companies, and we do not get paid from our customers for this additional burden. And I think as well it has a political dimension, because it reduces the overall acceptance of regulation and the understanding and the willingness to embrace regulation as well as a positive factor.
Yeah. That's a very good point. I will come back to that. But Kalina, what's your view?
Well, working in an industry which, in the renewable energy industry, which is green by nature, we actually like very much the regulation that supports the green transition. But I must say that it's not completely straightforward, and the world is not straightforward. When we meet ESG requirements, on the one hand, of course, we have supporting the green transition. On the other hand, we have met a lot of requirements with regards to supply chain and source of materials, and clearly the renewable energy is dominated by Chinese manufacturers. So there is a controversial attitude from Europe with regards to China. And on the one hand, we want to have the green transition, we want to have electric vehicles. On the other hand, we are less excited about all these being manufactured in China for a variety of reasons. So there are some internal tensions, obviously, but as a whole, I would say that for the industry that I represent, the regulation has been mostly not a challenge, different regulation, and ESG-related topics and regulation has been mostly supportive for us.
That's, in a sense, nice to hear. What do you think about the regulation and the omnibus now, the first learning?
So I also like this dynamic approach, even if it was really early. I mean, it was, let's say, the simplification arrived really after a few months in some cases. So I'm not, in general, everybody's against any over-regulation. That's always to be avoided and to be streamlined. On the other side, the regulation sometimes is creating a market, and a leadership. We should be a little bit like the UK with the tennis tournament in Wimbledon. They don't have the best players, but they set the rules. You will be with, it was in the past with white t-shirt, with the green grass, and you attract the best players, and you have the best tournament in the world with the rules that you set, even if you don't have the best players. This is happening on green, not so much on digital, because it was born in San Francisco, but I think a regulation sometimes can have this role in setting up markets, and thanks to the single market, of course, you can do that.
Okay, so I take from your answers that actually you sort of welcome the regulation that we have, and you also gave examples where it is helpful, and we also...
May I add one perspective which just comes to me, which is important for a business. I think a certain degree of predictability is as well important, and stability for a business.
Big word these days.
In particular for a company like ours who has to take long-term strategic technology decisions.
Even, I don't know if you would agree, to take this a bit further, that you need a certain regulation to, let's think, for instance, of the payment system. You can make the case that the regulation for instant payments was important to encourage the banks to provide this service for us. And maybe in the automotive sector would probably also be an obvious example where you mentioned that you invested in ICE and then you had to also think of the electric vehicles. But I think this is probably what you referred to when you said you want some predictable regulation. So you would sort of bet on the right horse as a company. Is that what you mean?
Yes, of course. If you take, for example, Euro 7 as a standard for emission, so of course it is good to understand, okay, what will be required from the industry, or when should certain CO2 levels be reached in the mix. So I think this is important, and as well to early on inform the participants of the industry in which direction as well the thoughts around regulation goes.
So would you say we need more regulation? I'm asking all four of you.
Clearer regulation, perhaps.
Clearer
so
regulation,
it was a very, I mean, with the Green Deal, this was really in my opinion, really the right push to the European market to act. Without this, I doubt that the private sector really had moved in this direction, and also with this speed. Now, for the time being, I see more really also looking from a business side, the topic that now it's a bit only a compliance topic. So this reporting is so overburdened, and really then focusing on the business opportunities, and really also for the CEE region, all the opportunities, investing there, what we saw from your presentation. I mean, here are really something which are tangible. But what I see for the time being with this sustainability topic, it's more, oh yeah, we have to comply, we have to do it. So put it into a little office and there, put some ESG reporting guys in, and they should solve it, and we do it what we do the rest of the time. So this is something where we should more focus on this opportunity side. I think this is very, very important also for the public discussion.
I think this is a very good final word on the regulation question. And let's maybe turn back to investment. And before I turn to the audience, so maybe you may want to think of questions, comments that you have. But let's go back to where you started with, which is the current economic environment. This great uncertainty that we have for mainly small and highly open economies. Of course, this current level of uncertainty and escalating protectionism may further lower the appetite for investments. And this comes on top of some domestic factors. The governor has alluded to this, that we are a bit concerned about the price competitiveness in the region for the combination of recent developments, including labor shortages, relatively high energy costs that these countries face. So there are both domestic and external factors that may keep investment low, especially in our countries here. So how do you personally assess the investment outlook for the CESEE region in your industry or for your company? And I would turn to Kalina and Jörg first again.
With regards to the current instability that was caused by Trump's policy for introducing and then deintroducing tariffs, obviously this causes concern and forces people to be more cautious about investment, and there are certain expectations about recession coming. However, the industry we operate in is in a unique position because now with digitalization and artificial intelligence, there is a very strong push for growing demand for electricity. Clearly, the whole digitalization and big data and artificial intelligence, this is a huge consumption of electricity. If Europe wants to have certain independence and certain reliability of generating the necessary electricity, it needs to turn to renewable sources. So even in some expectations for a slowdown of economic activity, the renewable industry is actually expecting further growth in demand. So we are quite positive on investments. We think there are great opportunities also for innovation in our sphere. If we get the support from financiers and from banks and international financial institutions, we could actually take advantage of a lot of opportunities.
So you see investment opportunities.
So first of all, you do not do investments for the vanilla taste of the day, of the week. So I think it's important to understand investments have a mid to long-term character. And I think we can only overcome as well this momentum of uncertainty, which we clearly have and feel in every conversation, in every panel, in every newspaper report. You can sense there we're looking for a new certainty in a certain way. But I personally believe, and this is as well the position we have at AVL, we can only overcome this uncertainty by gearing up at even solving in a better way the problems which we have. And I think the Green Deal, for example, was a perfect example where the framework was excellent. And I think now as well we need to have the breadth to carry through. yeah, and we not just stop because a rabbit runs across the road. We need to maybe slow down a little bit and let it pass, but we continue our way, right? And this is where our perspective on investment. We continue on our strategic level in R&D and capex investment at the given time. So different to your slide, you showed that the declining investment, we keep it on this level. We keep it as well in the region at this level. But of course and of course I'm a finance guy, every time it has a business case, and it has to, in the end, somehow it has not only to solve a problem, at the same time it has to pencil it well.
Do you also want to?
No, I like this very much because actually if you look in this uncertainty and these uncertain times, where to invest, I mean, then sometimes I'm struggling why this is not so obvious. If you are investing in a long-term, sustainable, resilient business case, which really takes care of really financial but also non-financial parameters, then you are on a safe journey, so to say. And this is independent on political changes or subsidies or whatever, then you are really on track. And therefore, I said in this statement, I made here really sustainability and sustainable business is here really an enabler for also for a long-term future perspective on a business case. Therefore, uncertainty is here, in my opinion, not the relevant word for it, because if you look closer in, you have already this pathway. And what we see now, we are in a transition, and here it's very important that we do not only support the very green, very social, very top performers, but really to take the whole value chain, so with us, the whole transition, all companies. I mean, it's like in a sports team. You cannot do your exercise with the best of the team, because otherwise you have only 2 good players, and the rest, if you have then a match, then you cannot win. You need to support in all of them. And this is the same what we, for example, now doing with our client engagement, where we really cluster them in different categories on their CO2 footprint, and really to engage with them how they can get here also better in their sustainable pathway. And I think this is very important for regulation, for Europe here to take all with on the train and really to support here the overall industry in their transition. Not only the best one, the already green ones. Yeah.
I was going to say that maybe in the tennis you can succeed with just 2 good players, but probably not even there. So probably you need a trainer and a huge team that we don't always see. Matteo, you are probably not investing, or EIB is sort of not investing itself, it's enabling, but you mentioned tangible investments before in your talk. So what's the role for innovation investments in the region?
Right. So EIB is normally financing investments of corporations, or giving the money to banks that they are financing SME, or governments, public sector. Let's say we are financing a lot of transport, trams, and so on. So looking at innovation is very important component, especially the digital part. What I see in Central Eastern Europe, that is the focus today, is that really we have seen a lot of improvements on the innovation side. So we have seen, for instance, the employees of the dedicated to research and development, they were doubling in 10 years. We have seen the intellectual property investments increasing quite significantly also as a share. We have seen productivity that is growing at faster pace than Western Europe. So a lot of good things were happening in the last 10 years, also on the research side. So it's not the manufacturing arm of Western Europe, no. It's a lot of developments. On the other side, there are big gaps. So patenting, the situation is patents are an output of research. And Germany alone is producing 16 times the number of patents of the entire Central Eastern Europe. So that's an aspect that is missing. If we take the top
We need more AVLs in Central Eastern Europe.
we will need, of course, yes. And there is potential in the region, for sure, because you have very skilled people. And if we take the top research and development investors in the world, the top 2,500, only 8 are from Central Eastern Europe. So those that are putting big money in research and development. There are some, big skill shortage. So that's a double-digit minus 15-20% of the population, because there is a demographic, especially. There's a big demographic problem that we know, but sometimes we don't think, we think of as kids, but we should think also as a skilled labor force and graduates. So the number of graduates is decreasing in the region. So it is increasing in percentage, but it is decreasing as a stock, as a flow, because the demographic. So that's so we should work on these gaps. Once you solve this, I think there is a very good potential. And of course, cohesion funds or cohesion policies are working in this direction at the EU level.
Before you bring any other horrifying numbers, let me turn to the audience and ask if you have any questions. And I think this would be the time to say that if you are in the online audience, then you can use this raise hand button. And my colleagues Daniela and Eva will give the mic to you. So, yeah, we have...
Thank you very much.
Maybe you could briefly or say who you are.
Yeah, okay. My name is Florian Wagner. I'm the CEO of Emerald Horizon. We are specialized on accelerator energy. It's somehow a small modular reactor version. My question here is, since the title is digital and climate transition, and since Google, Facebook, Amazon, and many of them are seeing the future in one way or the other, taking small modular reactors into consideration, I ask now the audience, have you ever thought about small modular reactors, how to use them, and which versions you would prefer, or why is it not mentioned in this presentation?
So
Thank you.
You're asking...
The audience in general, if possible.
Okay.
If whoever wants to say something.
Sorry, I couldn't quite understand.
Small modular reactors. These are the
energy
nuclear, or
it's a energy produces energy without carbon emission.
So
but is it nuclear, or?
Yeah, it's somehow nuclear. Some are more traditional, and like we are using a particle accelerator to harvest nuclear energy without a chain reaction and without adding plutonium and uranium. So, but in general, I want to say there are different versions of small modular reactors, and it's simply not on the presentation so far.
You patented this? You patented this because it seemed like,
It's
your innovation?
I don't want to talk about my innovation. I want to talk in general about small modular reactors. But in our situation, the CEO of CERN, this is this large particle accelerator, he has invented this idea to harvest or to use a particle accelerator to harvest nuclear energy without the traditional disadvantages of nuclear energy. But in general, the theme small modular reactors is pretty common at the moment. To give also a few numbers, a few $100 million were invested for Google, Facebook, and Amazon, especially in the last 6 to 8 months, exactly on this topic.
I think you already sort of anticipated this question when you said we need more electricity and therefore renewables are...
Well, nuclear is classified as renewable.
Yes.
So clearly, if Europe wants to be carbon-free, nuclear is a meaningful option. And unfortunately, I'm not familiar in depth with your technology. Traditional nuclear has been a challenge because of the risk of nuclear problems of an emergency situation. If your product is able to deliver the same type of baseload, reliable energy without the threat of a nuclear bomb, basically, I think it would have a great future. I'm simply personally not well familiar with the technology.
I already learned when we were introduced before the meeting that we already have some talks between AVL and your group. So I think I need to rely on our experts that they're interested in this exchange, and everything I've heard so far I think sounds very interesting and is really fascinating, and I think definitely is required to be on any map that needs to deal with energy transformation.
I think, yeah, it's a transition, and here, as we've seen also with defense policy, with whatever, some years ago nobody thought about that change is possible. And I think here, if we are talking of an energy transition, of course, all these aspects should be taken into account, because it's really now a change also in thinking on strategic direction. So exclusion policies are, in a way, not always helpful.
Something else, as far as I remember, Austria has a ban on nuclear, but this is not the case in any of the countries in Central and Eastern Europe. So
I know some are pretty interested in this technology. I just wanted to ask why it's not in this conversation, as even not mentioned, small modular reactors.
this is very innovative for us. We are not there yet.
This is why I wanted to add it to the conversation.
We have also another question. Tomas, please.
Tomas Lajcik, Central Bank of Austria. I have two questions. One is quite specific. Matteo mentioned a statistic about the extent to which CESEE as a whole lag behind Germany in terms of innovation capacity. So a question for Mr. Schmidt, do you happen to have your firm specific statistic about this? So what is the number of patents in your company in CESEE, say normalized per researcher or whatever, relative to Germany or your Austria? Yeah, so there will be one very specific question. The other one is much more general. I would like to come back to the title as well. The single market has not really been, the completeness or incompleteness of the single market has not really been addressed. So what is your, it's a question for the whole panel, whoever wants to pick it up. So what is your assessment of the completeness or incompleteness of the single market, especially the single market of goods and more relevant to me, services, because my humble opinion is it's not only not complete, but it is virtually non-existent in services. Thank you.
Yeah, please. Can we have a micro here?
Thank you very much. On this last point, the magnitude, since I was preparing another speech, the completeness of markets. Think about Canada, which has a federal structure, form of Europe. There, the claim is recent estimates or more recent estimates that the incompleteness there of the market, so the rules between the provinces, equivalent to a tariff rate of 21%. The estimates for goods in Europe are the equivalent of 46%. And with regard to services, 122%. So it shows that we are still far away from the completeness of a single market, which of course have a bearing then of investment, because if you don't get the opportunity to build your enterprise, then you have a problem. The second one has to do, because some of you mentioned it with regards to the financing of enterprises there, small and medium-sized enterprises. It is the growth capital which is largely missing in Europe. And this growth capital, each of the countries have tried to do a little part of it, whether it is now in the UK, it is the British Growth Fund. You have other part of it, but this is where you have real need there. And they hope that the they hope now that the Savings and Investment Union will create it in short notice. I think it may take a few decades in order to come up to this growth there. So what is your expectation there? To what extent the saving and investment unions will come up with an answer within the next couple of years, not the next couple of decades?
So before I give the floor to the next question, let me give you a chance to answer. Jörg, how is the relative patenting or R&D score?
This is such a detailed question. I cannot share this right now. I have to apologize.
This is a business secret.
No, not at all, but I just don't have it handy.
Okay,
So.
no worries.
But I would like to make a comment here, coming from Eastern Europe. Obviously, this is not a secret that we are not a research and development center. You know, Central and Eastern Europe, for a variety of socio-political reasons, has had the smartest of people emigrate several years ago. The universities in those countries are not the knowledge centers that you would expect to be able to support research and development. That's why we see R&D being led by the US, where they have the top universities, and by Western Europe, Germany for the engineering side, and Austria maybe to some extent. But Central and Eastern Europe takes what has already been invested somewhere else, and we are able to occasionally to have innovation which is comes from the region, but mostly we try to innovate with business models, with financing, and we try to scale up. But I think this is a social, political, and demographic phenomenon that higher education in Central and Eastern Europe has suffered and is not at par with American and Western European knowledge centers. So that is clear, and I hope obviously that investments in the region are also supported with regards to education and research centers, because it is a big problem when knowledge is concentrated only in one part of the world. Knowledge shall be abundant and shareable with other countries. And
I mean, also within Eastern Europe, we have some heterogeneity. It was mentioned this morning, and it was mentioned in your presentation, and I flew in this morning from Estonia, and I think they do have quite an impressive record. Also, the quality of their universities is rather high. I just happened to be at the university yesterday there and was impressed by the standards that they set for dissertations. But maybe you can...
Obviously, there is a lot of fragmentation also.
Fragmentation.
You know, Estonia is a very small country, and so is Latvia and everyone. So,
yeah. And they even have... they don't have this brain drain. They never had it in there. So we have differentiation, but I don't want to, depart from my role as the moderator so much. So maybe give you the chance to answer the two questions more or less on the single market.
Maybe some considerations on the single market from my side.
And then we have another question.
So first of all, when the famous 92, 93 that you were experiencing directly, that time, Jacques Delors, that was mainly the creator of this concept, was keeping outside because of some, it was considered as, let's say, strategic from the States, energy, telecom, and there is a third one that I don't remember now. Maybe some of you can help me. And then we have the...
What was it? Defense, yeah.
Defense, yes, but
yes, for sure.
I'm not sure it was one of the three.
I
but
think it
anyway,
was even four that
for sure. Services are very fragmented, and also the financial sector is fragmented. So it was already incomplete. So we know that some steps should be taken in this direction, in these fields. I don't know, in China and the US, we have four telecom operators. In if you cross the border, you receive your SMS with another operator. You have 4 for each country, including, I don't know, Luxembourg, you cross the border in Luxembourg and you have 4 different operators. So it's fragmented. So there are no synergies, less investments in technologies, and we are losing some opportunities. That's clear in these fields. Services, very, very relevant. And on the financial sector, sometimes I see the Central Eastern European region as a peculiar situation because you have banks, including Raiffeisen, Erste, Bank Austria, Unicredit, NLB, OTP, which are spread across the region. So it seems that they are forming the capital market union already available there and not in the West. So if you take the largest European players in banking, so the French banks, German banks and so on, they are in their own country. There is a huge home bias. Maybe they have a branch in another country, not always. Sometimes if you take the top 5 banks, some of them are in just one country, and while Raiffeisen is in 15 or 16 countries. So we have this peculiar situation in which there is a huge home bias. I think even if the day that we will have a perfect regulation, level playing field, we will have some, let's say, cultural or linguistic barriers always. And also if we look now at the M&A market, so there are a lot of M&A in banking sector going on. We have in Spain, 2 banks in Spain, Sabadell and BBVA, 6 banks in Italy, in intra-Italian M&A, all intra-Italian, all the 6 banks are merging inside Italy. Then we have only Unicredit bidding on Commerzbank, that is German, but Unicredit is having a German bank already. So everything is again happening on Germany to Germany, Italy to Italy, Spain to Spain. So there is, I don't see a big improvement at the moment. And are we missing an opportunity? Probably yes, and even more for this VC capital. VC, we should also turn a little bit the narrative. I think is not only something for bankers or banking, is these financing ideas of the young guys that are clever, smart engineers that are having good ideas. So it's not only a matter of banking sector. It's more for financing good ideas.
But the financial crisis perhaps showed that of course, you can regulate the banking sector, especially also with the supervision. So this works quite well. But then, of course, it's also a political question. If you want to have a single market, then you, from a governmental, from a country level, you have to give up power. And in times of uncertainty, where every country knows better to act than the other country, this is, of course, for the time being, also driven by uncertainty, etc., something which hinders, in a way, the further development. But here, coming back to the opportunities which helps us, which really offers the single market, I think in this direction, perhaps here, then people can also be convinced that the single market really helps.
You want to have a word on the single market, or?
Yes, I would like to draw another perspective on it. We are very much dependent on the investments into the educational systems in all the countries we operate. And therefore, I would say, as a long-term leading indicator, we look at PISA studies and the OECD comparables. And so how well are the investments into MINT subjects in particular? And there we see no real European integration. We have vast differences within Europe. And therefore, I think as well on the mid to long term, we are creating significantly different opportunities to innovate in different regions of Europe. And this might then cause migration, because this causes centers of excellence. I think if you look now back, looking at Estonia, but as well looking at Poland, for example, that really outperform Europe and the PISA studies. If you look at the Czech Republic or Slovakia, who do really, really well. If you look more at the southern eastern countries in Europe, which are more lagging below the average of the OECD studies, of the PISA studies, you see, okay, you already pre-program, so to say, the disparities of the next generation. And there is a second point, I think, if we embed in our educational system very much the understanding of so to say, the national curriculum. So national history, national language, maybe 1 or 2 second languages, but we do not make in the educational system the understanding of Europe as an opportunity, as a space for a huge group of different cultures, but that are still combined culturally as well, politically, economically. I think we do not as well create the basis for the creativity and fantasy to move into the next level. I think we live still to a certain degree of the visions of the generation who have really imagined Europe. And I think it is our responsibility, and as well as the heading over the torch then to the next generation as well, to re-inspire the idea of Europe and all the opportunities. And you described it. There are still so many opportunities, not only on harmonization, but as well on many other aspects. And I think we have too much of a narrative that is just criticizing that is not working, and some of the points that are raised, yes, that could as well sometimes work better, yeah. But this does not really give as well at the same time the room for a dialogue which is well founded in education and awareness that really as well supports the idea of Europe.
Dialogue is the key word. So this was a very nice, coherent, optimistic, visionary, forward-looking view now. But we have one more question. Let's see if you can break with it or reinforce it.
Thank you very much. 2 questions. First, single market. We had in the 80s, we had the same problem in Europe. Europe was falling back. We had the so-called Eurosclerosis. It was overcome by the single market program by Jacques Delors. We need something similar now. We need a banking union, savings and investment union, energy union, and a common market in defense. This would help very much.
Sort of
Third thing, green transition. The Chinese are using their green industries as their growth performers. 1 to 2% of the Chinese growth is coming from the green industries. Why do not we do the same? We in Western Europe, we should finance the exports of our green industries to Central and Eastern Europe, but also to developing and emerging markets. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we touched actually on most of these points already, since we have only 5 minutes left. Maybe you use this also as a final statement to the audience, taking up these questions. Who wants to go first?
So just maybe I take on defense. When we say, I don't know, Europe is not strong politically outside, or when we say it's not strong on defense, actually we are saying that Europe is strong on economics because there is integration. When there is no integration, that's a weakness. So the direction is what you are suggesting. So sometimes when we criticize Europe, we are doing a compliment on so the more integrated part, the European Central Bank, the euro adoption, single market, and so on, this economic part is working relatively well. And the defense side that is totally fragmented, of course, now we are in this difficult situation for that reason.
Lina.
As a concluding remark, I must say that for the countries from Central and Eastern Europe that joined the European Union, this has been a great success story. And it's a story of economic success and improved defense, actually, being part of the European Union. And if anybody is not sure about that, you need to look at the countries within Central and Eastern Europe that did not join the European Union, like Serbia, Northern Macedonia, Albania, and Ukraine, if you count Moldova. Moldova. So you see what's the difference in standard of living, innovation, whatever success measurements you could have. So this is I think that it's important to say that because for Euroscepticism, for people calling for more independence, defragmentation, we need to be very aware that the European Union has created fantastic opportunities for its newest members to improve the quality of living. Of course, there are more things to do, and we seek to find areas of improvement, and from our industry's perspective, the common market, the unified market, makes a lot of sense, and we hope this is a shared vision.
Now, Jörg, you have already given us the vision of a common European curriculum. Can you top it with your final statement?
No, I think one last thought, and I highly appreciate your comment as well with regard to more green investments in Europe. I think, yes, and at AVL we would love to see this, of course, yes. But I think we need to look at as well at, with the highest respect, what our AVL customers in the green field and the automotive industry really have accomplished over the last decade in China. And yes, this is a high degree of innovation. This is a high degree of hard work. This is a high degree of cost discipline. And this is a high degree of acting with all the participants, regulators, investment funds, banking sector, to being strategically aligned. And I think this is, with all respect to the Chinese actors as well, I need to think there is a case to learn. And there is a case to learn, and that we could pull this off as well. Yeah? And we can pull this off as well if we pool our interests and our capabilities in Europe together as well, building new industries that really are light towers for the world.
Yes, and perhaps this, I think Europe has now the possibility to stay with this sustainable Green Deal pathway, go this direction and make the difference, also compared to China, to the US, to really make here a difference. I think this is a competitiveness advantage if we stay on this route, because this is a resilient long-term perspective, also business-wise. And what I also see, especially for the CEE region, these common efforts from public and private sectors, and really here also working together with governments on incentives, etc., is really here key, that here all stakeholders are on the table, the industry, the public, the private side, but also the public side, to here really use the money which is in the market to accelerate here the sustainable path.
Yeah. Thank you so much to all of you, and also to you, the audience, for staying with us, for having interesting questions. Let's give a big hand to the panelists. I think it was a very insightful and very positively inspiring discussion that we had. So I wish you all a nice evening, and thank you for joining us for this presentation. And let's hope that we started a good tradition now with presenting new results of this survey next year again here. Thank you.